Over the past decade, I've analysed more than 100 cycling sessions every single week. That's thousands of workouts and hours of data. And along the way, I've learnt some surprising truths about what really works. As a cycling coach since 2012, I've worked with over 200 athletes of all levels, designing, reviewing, and adapting their weekly training. This means I've created and analysed thousands of sessions, tweaking everything from power zones to recovery blocks. And I didn't just write these plans, I studied the results to see what worked. So here are 40 surprising lessons I've learned doing this. Lesson number 1. An athlete I brought on had plateaued after they hit a cap on the hours that they could train. It wasn't until we reduced their training hours that they saw some changes. Actually, the performance improvements followed almost immediately. So lesson number 1 is training less can yield better results. This varies by individual, but when you're consistently overtraining, your body spends all of its energy trying to recover instead of actually building fitness. Number 2. Many riders become obsessed with FTP, and I remember one specific rider that saw major gains after focusing on other metrics. In their case, it was endurance and sprint work that unlocked their performance potential. So lesson number 2 is FTP is not the ultimate metric. It can stay the same, but other areas can change, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss them altogether. Number 3. Now, I'm making this statistic up, but my guess is that riders who spend 70% of their time doing low-intensity endurance rides of any sort consistently outperform others in races. So lesson number 3 is endurance is key for most cyclists. This might seem obvious, but you would be surprised how many people don't do it nearly enough. Number 4. In the same ballpark as you can't outride a bad diet, a perfectly designed plan will fail due to poor sleep and eating habits. You might make some gains, but overall it will eventually hit a plateau and you won't know why. So lesson number 4 is sleep and nutrition trump any plan. Nail these down and the work you do on the bike will be much more effective. Number 5. I've seen riders improve significantly with just 6 hours of weekly training. This isn't a lot and doesn't last forever, but if that's all you have, you can make meaningful progress with a solid structure. So lesson number 5 is fitness gains are possible with limited time. Number 6. This is one of the most common things I've seen, and it gets in the way of real progress. It's this: athletes training for where they want to be, not where they are. In other words, setting intervals based on overestimated FTPs, which made them struggle to complete workouts. So lesson number 6 is FTP estimates are often inflated, so don't do that. It will help you in the long run to be honest with yourself about your current level. Number 7. This might be a surprise for the numbers-driven athletes, but I've seen athletes gain massive fitness improvements without a power meter and relying on heart rate and RPE instead. So lesson 7 is a power meter is not essential for progress, and even if you do have a power meter, it helps to sometimes not to see the numbers so you can read your body better. Number 8. This is very common, and honestly, I struggle with it as a coach. Many riders absolutely love their fast group rides. While my job isn't to kill their motivation, I sometimes need to guide them in new directions, as I've seen too many riders struggle in races until they switch to focused solo training. So lesson number 8 is group rides can hinder progress, and making a decision to why you ride will help you make the decisions you need to maintain motivation and performance. Number 9. For any focused athlete, this lesson is either learnt the hard way or I catch it early. And it's about panicking after missing a session and making poor choices afterwards, like cramming in makeup miles or extra intensity. So lesson number 9 is skipping sessions can be a smart decision. Moving on from a missed session instead of playing catch up not only gives your next interval workout a chance at being better, it helps maintain a consistent progression and not put you at risk of injury or overtraining. Number 10. Similar to Stephen Covey's first things first rule, we want to do the most important things before moving on. In the cycling context, this principle is applied to emphasize building a proper endurance base before moving on to more specialized training like anaerobic work. So lesson number 10 is build a strong foundation before any high intensity work. Number 11. I remember one specific rider that used to go off prescription and added a lot of extra hours to long rides. The problem is the extras didn't have any purpose, so they stagnated. And when we capped their volume, performance improved. So lesson number 11 is spending more time in the saddle doesn't guarantee results. It has to have a purpose and fit into an overall plan for you to make meaningful gains. Number 12. Consider two 40-year-olds who start training. The one with more athletic experience may need less endurance work to see improvements. So lesson 12 is training age. Your years of athletic experience matters more than your actual age when determining how to distribute training intensity. Number 13. An athlete once asked me for magic intervals, trying to uncover the best, most advanced and evidence-informed intervals, but the truth is they don't exist. So my job was to convince them to focus on simple, repetitive endurance, and you know what happened? They improved. So lesson 13 is simplicity in training often leads to the best results. Number 14. You might hear this about Zone 2, but even when riding Zone 1, many riders struggle to keep it easy. In other words, they ride recovery rides too hard. So lesson number 14 is recovery rides should be truly easy, like they should feel embarrassingly easy. Number 15. A cyclist fixated on cadence saw better power once they stopped overthinking it. So lesson 15 is cadence matters less than you think. There's no need to optimize your cadence during every training session. We are naturally pretty good at self-optimizing towards the task demand optimum. It doesn't mean cadence work can't be part of your training. It's just not as important as you think. Number 16. Ever notice how you can be focused on one area and then you miss improvements elsewhere? I had a rider who felt frustrated with their progress until I showed them all of the areas where they had improved. They hadn't even considered these areas. So the lesson here is progress isn't linear. Expect ups and downs. But looking beyond your usual metrics often reveals gains even when you think you're not improving. Number 17. Having seen countless training sessions, both ones I've created and those from new athletes' histories, I've noticed that overly complex plans often hinder progress. The solution is straightforward: simplify the approach. So lesson number 17 is overcomplicated plans rarely outperform simple ones. Now, the thinking behind a plan may be sophisticated, but what matters is that the training plan itself remains clear and straightforward to execute. Number 18. I had a rider once that did not want to do intervals. They were a bit old school in that way, but it was their multi-year plan. Instead, they wanted to ride endurance, a lot of endurance. And this isn't my typical approach, but it did teach me something. Riders who spend time building aerobic endurance dominate in long races, even without intervals. So lesson number 18 is aerobic endurance is the foundation of performance. There is no way around it, and it will take you further than you think. Number 19. After coaching a guy that was considered a traditional climber, I was surprised that he didn't have any sprints in his program. I mean, he completely ignored sprint training. So it was no surprise that he got stronger across all terrains after adding 10-second bursts. So the lesson, number 19, is sprint training benefits all cyclists, not just sprinters. Number 20. This lesson shows up all the time in the numbers, but only becomes clear once you get the full context from the athlete. When you see an athlete fatiguing halfway through rides, the first thing to try and fix is increasing carbs during rides. 8 out of 10 times, this solves the issue overnight. So lesson number 20 is, most cyclists don't fuel enough during rides. Number 21. I make a point of this in almost every session that I ride. I've refined it over the years and after seeing riders ignoring it and struggling in intervals. So lesson number 21 is a proper warm-up can make or break your workout. The more intense the workout, the longer your warm-up needs to be. Number 22. Chronic stress mostly comes from life rather than training. So it's no surprise that even when everything looks good, while you're analyzing a workout, it impacts recovery so much that reducing training volume and focusing on recovery is the only way to get through stressful work and life periods. So lesson number 21 is stress outside training impacts performance. Adjust accordingly. Number 23. Believe it or not, my job as a coach is to stop people from riding. The chances are that if you're driven and you love riding, you don't want to take a day off. But if you have a well-planned training plan, you don't need to feel guilty about missing days. So lesson 23 is it's better to undertrain than overtrain. Staying fresh enough to nail key workouts and improve means you don't need to take days off. Number 24. Within any training plan, there are key sessions in a week. A cyclist who trains inconsistently can still improve if they always hit key sessions. So lesson number 24 is long-term consistency beats short-term intensity. Number 25. Weight has always been an issue in cycling. The talk around it is changing, and we are seeing the health of the rider put first in a lot of cases. So this next lesson is an important one to understand if the message doesn't get through otherwise. I had a rider once who lost 10 kilograms and found that their power also dropped. So lesson number 25 is weight loss doesn't always equal better performance. It's about balancing weight and strength and monitoring performance and subjective feel as you are losing the weight. Number 26. Many times a newer cyclist will feel frustrated during a hard block because they aren't seeing the numbers that they want to see. And this is normally because fatigue is masking their true performance potential. So lesson 26 is fitness gains can take longer to appear, so you have to trust the process and focus on both working hard and recovering well. Number 27. Where you ride and race is an important factor to consider when thinking about your weight. A rider focused on watts per kilogram was beaten by someone with higher absolute power in a flat sprint. Duh. So the lesson here is absolute power can matter more than power to weight ratio. Number 28. Recently, a guy came to me burnt out after building his volume and intensity up over 8 months. Every week he did a little more, but always at the same intensity, flat out. And he was burnt out and he didn't know what to do. So lesson 28 is riding fast all the time doesn't make you fast. Number 29. This next lesson is one of those things in cycling that everybody talks about, but not many people actually do it well. And I get it. It's hard and expensive to get right on every single ride. But if you can find a sustainable way to add the right amount of carbs during workouts, your riding and recovery will improve dramatically. So lesson number 29 is nutrition timing during rides impacts recovery significantly. Number 30. I would now consider anyone not doing this next lesson as old school, especially if you're a powerful rider like a sprinter. I've had many riders skeptical of gym work who added power after focusing on strength training. So lesson number 30 is strength training benefits every cyclist, not just sprinters. Number 31. Sometimes in the middle of a big training block, we don't want to miss a ride, and trust me, I get it. But it can take just one ride too many, to make the difference between completing the block or getting sick. Skipping one ride can prevent weeks of lost training. So lesson 31 is missing a planned training ride is better than riding when sick. While conventional wisdom says you can do light riding if symptoms are above the neck, even that may be too much when you factor in all of life's stresses. Number 32. This lesson is one that is missed by riders who have never done big hours in training, but I've seen it time and time again. A rider's FTP will improve from endurance training alone. So lesson 32 is FTP isn't always best improved by threshold training. Number 33. This lesson emerged when I noticed that an athlete was completing all of their prescribed workouts, but still experiencing burnout. While they were physically capable of doing the training, they were mentally exhausted. Only after implementing scheduled mental recovery breaks, like taking complete days off from thinking about training or adding in soul rides, did their performance and motivation improve. So the lesson here is mental recovery is as important as physical recovery. Number 34. This lesson comes from years of experience guiding beginner cyclists. And as a beginner, it's tempting to sign up for too many races. And while racing is essential for learning racecraft and gaining invaluable experience, it disrupts consistent training. So lesson 34 is too many races can hinder long-term development. Number 35. I'm sure you've heard the phrase train like a pro, but I want to flip this. Let me explain. You might be surprised to hear that amateurs often train harder than pros in single sessions, but neglect recovery, leading to slower progress. The broader context is that every person sits on a spectrum from stress from internal and external factors. So lesson 35 is most cyclists recover worse than professionals. And I want to flip the idea of training like a pro to recover like a pro. Number 36. Everything you do is driven by ego, probably even riding a bike in the first place. Who knows? But certainly I've seen it time and time again when ego leads to overpacing early in events or training rides. It's a recipe for failure. Controlling ego will improve results. So lesson number 36 is ego is the biggest enemy of consistent progress. Number 37. At the start of a training plan, you have a path to your goal. But that path is not perfect. Any number of things can take you off the path. And one thing I learned early on is that no training plan has worked perfectly without adjustments. So lesson number 37 is adaptability in training is more important than perfection. Number 38. This one is a classic mistake, and everyone has made it. I have made it, and I've seen it play out every single year that I've coached, and that is riders who jump into high volume plans and burn out quickly. A slow, steady build delivers better results. So lesson number 38 is a steady build outperforms a quick ramp up. Number 39. This is one of the most underrated qualities in cycling, and unfortunately it's not something that you can measure or see in training data. It's an invisible force that becomes apparent in long events where mental and physical endurance combine. I've seen cyclists transform their performance in endurance events once they develop this through consistent, progressive training. Lesson number 39 is developing resilience is as important as building endurance. Number 40. When analyzing a training session, heart rate is just as important as power data. Understanding how these metrics work together is crucial for making adjustments to your training plan and during rides. So lesson number 40 is heart rate and power data each provide unique and valuable insights about your ride. To learn how to interpret these metrics, watch this video here.